I want you to picture a pressure cooker for a second.
Okay.
It's sitting on a stove, the burner is on high, and that little valve on top is starting to hiss.
Mm-hmm.
That is how most of us naturally visualize our emotions, isn't it?
It's the default metaphor.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. You feel something frustrating happen, maybe an email from your boss, or someone cuts you off in traffic.
Yeah.
And it feels like this physical substance, this hot gas, is just expanding inside your chest.
And the logic that follows is that you have two choices.
Exactly. You either bottle it up until the whole thing blows, or you vent it.
You let the steam out.
You scream, you punch a pillow, you rant to a friend.
It feels intuitive. And it feels intuitive because it matches our physical sensations. Psychologists call this the hydraulic model of emotion.
The hydraulic model.
Right, the idea that emotion is a fluid, a volume that has to go somewhere. But here's the thing.
What's that?
According to the research we are looking at today, that model is completely wrong.
And not just, like, technically wrong in a textbook way. It's the kind of wrong that can actually make your mental health worse.
That's it. If you treat your anxiety or anger like steam that needs to be vented, you might actually be turning up the heat on the stove without even realizing it.
So that is what we are unpacking today. We are doing a deep dive into a really heavy-hitting conversation between podcaster Chris Williamson and Donald Robertson.
And Robertson's such a fascinating figure. He sits right at the intersection of these two worlds.
Ancient Stoic philosophy on one hand,
And modern cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, on the other.
so the mission for this deep dive is really to hand you a different set of blueprints for your own brain.
We're going to debunk that hydraulic model.
And we're going to look at why your brain actually likes to worry and kind of uses it as this weird shield to avoid feeling true emotion.
And we are definitely going to talk about the dead fish.
We have to talk about the dead fish.
We do.
But let's start with the basics. If the pressure cooker is a lie, what's the truth? Because that feeling of pressure, it's real. I feel it. You feel it.
The feeling is real, yes, but the mechanism isn't what you think it is. Robertson suggests we swap the pressure cooker metaphor for a recipe.
A recipe, like baking a cake.
Precisely. Think about a cake. You don't just walk into a forest and find a wild cake growing under a tree.
No.
A cake is an aggregate result. It's what happens when you mix flour, sugar, eggs, and heat in a very specific way.
Okay.
And Robertson argues that anxiety or anger doesn't exist as some solid thing inside you. It's an aggregate of specific ingredients.
So, okay, instead of flour and eggs, what are we baking with here? What are the ingredients?
Well, the ingredients of an emotion are usually something like a value judgment, a mental image, a physical sensation, and a behavioral impulse.
Let's make this practical. Let's bake a pancake.
Yeah.
Say I have a massive presentation tomorrow and I'm just, freaking out.
Okay.
The hydraulic model says I just have a blob of fear inside me.
But the recipe model breaks it down. So ingredient 1 is the thought, if I mess this up, I'm going to lose my job. Ingredient 2, the mental image. You're picturing your boss frowning, or maybe the audience laughing at you.
Yeah.
Ingredient 3 is the sensation. Your stomach is tight. Your palms are sweaty. And ingredient 4 is the action. You're pacing around your kitchen.
And the reason this shift in metaphor matters, the reason we're even talking about this, is agency.
That is the whole point. If anxiety is just hydraulic pressure, you're helpless. You're a vessel waiting to explode.
But if it's a recipe...
You can change the ingredients.
Right. So if I stop pacing, if I change that action ingredient and I just force myself to sit still and breathe...
The taste of the cake changes.
Wow.
Or if you change the thought ingredient from I'm going to get fired to I'm actually prepared for this, the emotion physically transforms.
So you're not suppressing the steam.
No, you are deconstructing the mixture. You're baking something else entirely.
Okay, so that's the theory. But how do you actually do the deconstruction, especially when the fear is really, really intense?
Well, this brings us to what Robertson calls the gold standard of psychotherapy.
He said if therapy was a competitive sport, this technique would be the undefeated heavyweight champion for, 70 years?
That's the one. We're talking about exposure therapy.
Which, I have to say, sounds terrifying.
It sounds awful, I know, but it works because it leverages a biological rule called habituation.
Habituation.
And to get this, we have to look at what happens in your body when you are truly terrified.
Right.
The classic example they always use is a cat phobia.
Right, the cat phobia. So walk us through this. You take someone who is deathly afraid of cats, and you put them in a room with a completely harmless little tabby cat. What is happening biologically in that first minute
Total system overriding. Their amygdala, which is the brain's smoke detector, just slams the emergency button. Adrenaline dumps into the bloodstream. Cortisol spikes.
And their heart rate.
It probably doubles within 5 seconds.
Yeah.
It's beating as if they are sprinting for their life.
And the brain is just screaming, one command, run, get out of here.
Right. That is the action ingredient we were just talking about. The impulse to escape is completely overwhelming.
And if they do run out of the room, they feel better. Instantly.
Immediately. The heart rate drops. The panic subsides. But, and this is probably the most critical point of our entire deep dive, what did their brain just learn?
It learned that the room was dangerous.
Exactly.
It learned, phew, that was close. We escaped the tiger. Good job, team.
You validated the phobia. You rewarded the fear response with a feeling of relief.
Yeah.
Exposure therapy works by doing the exact opposite.
You stay in the room.
You stay in the room.
Yeah.
Because here is the biological reality. You cannot sprint forever.
The tank eventually runs dry.
It has to. It's a physiological inevitability.
Right.
If you stay in that room with the cat, and the cat just sits there, licking its paw,
Right.
eventually the nervous system looks around and goes, wait a minute, we're burning all this expensive fuel, but we aren't dying. The heart rate must come down.
Robertson has that great visual for this. He calls it the stegosaurus tail.
It's a perfect image. Imagine a graph of your anxiety levels over time. Day 1 in the room with the cat, you get this massive spike. That's the tall, bony plate on the dinosaur's back.
Super high intensity.
But you stay there. You wait it out. Eventually, that line drops back down.
And then day 2, you go back in.
The spike happens again, but maybe this time it's only 80% as high, and it drops faster. Day 3, lower still.
And over time, those spikes just taper off.
Into a long, flat tail. That is habituation.
Yeah.
That is your brain literally rewriting its own prediction code from danger to boring.
But the trap, and I think this is where most people fail when they try to face their fears on their own.
Is leaving too early.
Right. It's the sunk cost fallacy of anxiety. You sit there for 20 minutes panicking, and then you run away before your heart rate drops naturally.
And you did all the suffering for zero gain. In fact, you made it worse. You have to stay until the tail appears. You have to prove to your amygdala that the alarm was a glitch.
Now, this gets even trickier when we move away from, say, cats and we move towards people. Because Robertson brings up second-order anxiety. But this is for anyone listening who deals with social anxiety.
And this is a huge distinction. With a cat, you're afraid of the cat. With social anxiety, you're usually afraid of yourself.
Yes. You're in a meeting, and you aren't just worried about the topic. You're thinking, oh no, my hands are shaking. People can see I'm blushing. My voice just cracked.
It's the fear of the fear itself. It's metacognitive. You start scanning your own body for symptoms of anxiety.
And that creates a vicious cycle.
Because that self-scanning is, in itself, a form of avoidance. You stop paying attention to the actual conversation, and you start obsessing over your own biology.
He also points out that people develop these little safety behaviors to hide it.
Right, like gripping a water glass super tight so your hand doesn't shake, or wearing a turtleneck to hide a rash on your neck.
And those safety behaviors, they prevent the habituation.
They do. Because even if the meeting goes well, your brain doesn't learn that the meeting was safe. It learns, well, we only survived because you held onto that water glass for dear life.
You never learned that you were safe all along.
Exactly.
I want to pivot here because while phobias are fascinating, I feel like the daily grind for most of us isn't a room full of cats.
No.
It's the loop.
Mm-hmm.
It's 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, worrying about taxes, or that weird noise the car is making, or the future of the economy.
A worry loop.
And Robertson drops a bomb here. He says worry is not the same thing as fear.
In fact, he argues that we worry in order to avoid feeling fear.
Okay, that is probably the most counterintuitive idea in this whole discussion.
It really is.
We think, I'm worrying because I'm afraid.
But Robertson flips it. He says, worry is a defense mechanism against fear.
You have to unpack that. Because when I'm worrying, it feels like I'm doing work. It feels like I'm problem solving.
It feels productive. What if this happens? Well, then I'll do that.
Yeah.
But it's actually what he calls abstract jumping around. Think about the difference between thinking the word spider and actually seeing a real spider in front of you.
One is just data. The other is visceral.
Exactly. Worry is verbal. It's linguistic. It's chatter up in your prefrontal cortex.
Yeah.
But fear is visual and sensory. It's images and feelings.
Okay.
And he cites this research where they monitored people during intense worry episodes. You'd expect their heart rate to be through the roof.
Of course. If I'm thinking about going bankrupt, my heart should be pounding.
But the data shows it often isn't. In many cases, heart rate actually goes down slightly during intense worry.
What?
The primary physical symptom of worry isn't cardiovascular panic. It's muscular tension. Shoulders up by your ears, jaw clenched tight.
So why does the brain choose tension over panic?
Because panic hurts. Panic involves vivid mental images of catastrophe. Seeing yourself homeless, seeing the rejection. That is emotionally painful.
So the brain switches to worry mode.
It suppresses the images by flooding the system with words, with language.
That is wild. So I'm basically intellectualizing the catastrophe so that I don't have to emotionally feel it?
Precisely. You are keeping the threat in the abstract verbal part of your brain so it doesn't hit the visceral visual part. Worrying is a numbing agent.
It's drunk problem solving. That's the phrase Robertson used that really stuck with me.
It's perfect. When you're anxious, your amygdala is running the show, you have low bandwidth thinking. You are, for all intents and purposes, cognitively impaired.
Which brings us to the tools.
Right.
Because if we know that worry is just a stall tactic by a drunk brain, how do we sober up?
Robertson gives us two main tools. The first one is called worry postponement.
And I have to play devil's advocate. If I catch myself worrying and I just say, I'll think about this later, isn't that just procrastination?
You would think so, but the clinical data is surprisingly strong on this. It's a stimulus control technique.
Okay.
You catch the worry at 10 a.m. and you tell yourself, I'm not in the right state of mind for this. I have a meeting with this worry at 7 p.m. tonight. And you literally write it down.
You schedule a business call with your panic.
And here's the magic trick. By the time 7 p.m. rolls around, the context has totally changed. You aren't in the heat of the moment. You've had dinner. You've moved on with your day.
The sober brain is back online.
Your prefrontal cortex is back in charge. And so when you look at the notebook at 7 p.m.,
You aren't worrying anymore.
you're just problem solving. You look at the note that says taxes and you think, okay, right, I need to call the accountant tomorrow. The emotional charge is gone.
And he said this alone can reduce worry by, what, 50% in a few weeks?
About 50%, yeah. The duration and intensity.
That's a massive return on investment. But what about the really sticky thoughts, the ones you can't just schedule away? He mentioned a second tool, cognitive diffusion.
This comes from ACT acceptance and commitment therapy. And the analogy here is a telescope.
Okay.
Normally, when you have an anxious thought like, I'm a failure, you are looking to the telescope. The thought is the lens you see the world through.
And everything looks dark and hopeless because the lens is dirty.
Right. Cognitive diffusion is the act of pulling your eye away from the eyepiece and looking at the telescope itself. You observe the thought as an object.
And there's a specific, slightly weird grammatical hack to do this, right?
Yes. Robertson suggests switching to the third person. So instead of thinking, I am worried about money, you say to yourself,
I noticed that the host is having the thought that he is worried about money.
it sounds a little silly, but it forces a perspective shift. It creates distance. It breaks the illusion that the thought is reality.
It's just mental weather.
It's a mental weather pattern passing through your head. It isn't the landscape itself.
I want to shift gears now because we spent a lot of time on anxiety, but Robertson was very clear that his current obsession is actually anger.
The forgotten emotion of therapy.
Which is strange, right? Because he said that CBT for anger is incredibly effective.
Something like a 70% success rate. Higher than for depression or PTSD. It's the low-hanging fruit of mental health.
So why is nobody talking about it? Why isn't it treated?
Because of the nature of the emotion itself. Anger is an externalizing emotion. If I'm anxious or depressed, I feel bad inside. I blame myself.
And you want relief.
But if I'm angry, I blame you.
Right. You cut me off. You were rude. You didn't respect me.
Exactly. Why would I go to a therapist when you're the problem? Angry people rarely seek help because the emotion convinces them that they are right and everyone else is wrong.
There is a story in the source material, the bathtub story, that I think just perfectly captures what anger actually is.
Oh, it's a profound little anecdote.
Yeah.
A father walks into the bathroom and finds his young daughter sitting in the tub just crying her eyes out. He asks her, are you sad? And she just snaps back at him, no, I'm pissed off.
Which is such a real kid reaction.
So the dad is confused. He asks, well, why are you crying if you're angry?
And she gives this heartbreakingly logical answer.
She says, because when I'm angry, my sister runs away from me. But when I'm sad, she gives me a hug.
Wow. When I'm angry, she runs away. When I'm sad, she gives me a hug.
It reveals the mechanism perfectly. Anger is a suit of armor. It is almost always a secondary emotion.
So underneath the anger,
There's something vulnerable. Sadness, hurt, fear, rejection. But sadness makes us feel weak. Sadness requires us to ask for help.
and anger makes us feel powerful.
It's Dutch courage. It pushes people away to make us feel safe. It's a distraction technique to avoid feeling the real pain of the sadness.
And interestingly, this seems to be a culturally learned behavior.
Yeah, Robertson cited some Gallup polls that were pretty shocking.
The data showed that Americans report getting angry about 25% more than Brits or Canadians.
And to something like 3 times more than the Japanese.
That is a huge gap.
It really suggests that this suit of armor isn't just biological, it's cultural. We have a culture that often rewards the external display of power, which is anger, and views the internal reality, sadness, as a weakness. So we learn to put on the mask.
So we've dissected anxiety as a recipe, worry as avoidance, and anger as a mask for sadness. And this all circles back to the foundation of Robertson's work. Because 2,000 years before modern psychology, the Stoics had basically figured all of this out.
They were the original cognitive therapists. They understood that emotions were based on judgments, the recipe model, long before we had fMRI machines.
But they didn't just sit around in togas reading scrolls. They believed in training.
Oh, yeah.
And this is where we have to talk about the graveyard. You promised us the graveyard story.
This is the shamelessness exercise.
Yeah.
It comes from the Cynics, who were essentially the radical punk rock cousins of the Stoics.
Right.
And they believed that social anxiety, the fear of what other people think of you, was a form of slavery.
So to break the chains, they went to the extreme.
They practiced doing ridiculous things in public to build up an immunity to embarrassment. One famous story involves a philosopher dragging a dead fish.
Or sometimes a bottle.
Right, on a string through a graveyard.
And we should clarify, ancient graveyards weren't these quiet memorial parks.
No, they were busy places where social outcasts, prostitutes, and rough crowds hung out.
So you're walking through a crowd of judgmental people, dragging a piece of rotting garbage on a leash like it's a poodle.
Everyone is staring. Everyone is pointing. Everyone thinks you have completely lost your mind.
It is the ultimate nightmare for anyone with social anxiety.
And that's the point. You invite the nightmare. You do the ridiculous thing. You survive the laughter.
When you realize,
Hey, their opinions didn't actually kill me. My character is still intact. It is a shame attack.
it's extreme, but I get the logic. If you can drag a dead fish through a crowd without flinching, you're probably not going to be scared of speaking up at a marketing meeting.
Exactly. But Robertson also warns about the flip side of this. He talks about the lions and foxes.
The quote from Epictetus.
It's a stinging critique. Epictetus told his students, "You are lions in the classroom, but foxes in the street."
Ouch.
It cuts deep, right? It means you're brave and you're wise when you're sitting in a lecture hall discussing philosophy. You talk a big game about courage.
But the moment you step into the real world, the moment life gets hard.
You act like a cowardly fox.
That is the pen and paper problem.
Right. And we see this today with the whole biohacking crowd or the self-help junkies. You can have the perfect morning routine, the ice bath, the journal.
But if someone cuts you off in traffic and you lose your mind...
Or you have a financial crisis and you just crumble. The tools weren't real. They were compartmentalized.
So the training has to happen in the real world.
You have to take the training off the yoga mat and into the traffic jam. That is where the real work happens.
So let's bring this all home. We've covered a lot of ground. We've moved from the pressure cooker myth to the recipe.
Realizing we have the agency to change our emotional ingredients.
We learned that exposure therapy works because of the stegosaurus tail. If you stay with the fear, the brain eventually just gets bored of it.
We discover that worrying is often just a verbal trick the brain plays to avoid visual fear, and we learn to schedule our panic for 7 p.m.
And we learned that anger is often just a bodyguard for sadness, and that sometimes you just need to drag a dead fish through a graveyard to get over yourself.
I mean, maybe not literally.
Maybe not literally. Robertson left us with one final thought in the source material that I think is the perfect way to close. When people ask him who the true Stoic sages are today, who the wisest people he knows are, he doesn't name the famous gurus or the tech billionaire.
No. He says the wisest people he knows are the recovering ones, the recovering addicts, the recovering angry people.
The people who hit rock bottom.
Exactly.
Why them?
Because they had to look at their recipe for life and admit it was poisoning them. They had to deconstruct their entire operating system, rebuild it from scratch.
They don't take their stability for granted.
Because they had to earn it, piece by piece.
It's a powerful reminder that wisdom isn't about being born calm or perfect. It's about the work you do after you realize your current tools are broken.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So here is your call to action for the week. We want you to try the worry appointment. The next time you feel that loop starting about work or money or whatever it is for you, don't suppress it.
And don't indulge it.
Just write it down. Meeting with worry at 7 p.m.
And see what happens when you show up to that meeting with a sober brain. Chances are the monster's a lot smaller than you thought.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.